because the psyche is never just in one person. But, you know, there is also the person who kind of channels this and holds this and makes this happen. That is a hard role. Okay, so I'm going to say a few words and then I'm going to read a snippet of my own creative work. And what I want to say, we're kind of coming out of Jungian psychology here. So I want to open with a very revealing quotation from a Jungian analyst, Renee Cunningham, when she was presenting very recently and talking about her work, which has been to take Jungian ideas into archetypal nonviolence. But she talked about being an analyst, being in a room with a patient, and how the job of the analyst, of the Jungian therapist, is to interact with that patient and hold the space, in a way that made room for the unknown, for the mysterious, to become not an individual person, but to become this temenos, this container. And that if you hold the space, connecting with the other, connecting with what's there in the room, however distressing it might be from this other person, if you hold that space, then an image will arise. And of course, that is what artists do all the time. You are immersed in the material and you hold a position with that material and hoping that an image will arise. And in a sense, what Jungian therapists do and what artists do, whatever their art medium, is the same thing. It's to hold, it's to go beyond the ego, unite with the other, and hold this temenos where the image will arise from somewhere else. And that becomes the starting point for a piece of creative work. And many of you will know that I've been developing the creative side of Jungian psychology into this thing called Jungian art space research, which I'm not going to talk about right now. I am going to be doing a seminar on it in the International Association for Jungian Studies in a couple of weeks. But what I want to say is that this idea, Jungian art space research, is simply a restoration of what art can be in terms of making knowledge, in terms of addressing the collective needs of the world, in terms of addressing the religious needs of the world. We all know that the Western tradition of the arts, creativity has been marginalized in our Western tradition, and that in other indigenous societies, art is not separate from medicine. It's not separate from communal rituals. It's not separate from the real everyday problems of making a society work. It's not separate from religion, as it hasn't been, as there were times in our Western tradition where art and religion were pretty well united. But that this notion of arts-based research is a way of countering the marginalization of the creative psyche in our world today. And in the considerable literature on arts-based research, James Rowling Jr. proposed that there were 4 modes of arts-based research. And I'm going to mention them here because I think they're a very good way of thinking about the creative Jungian work, the Jungian work of creativity leading to a creative work leading to art. These 4 modes are analytic, synthetic, critical activist, and improvisatory. And these ideas give us what artists do. So we're holding the space, we're holding the temenos in the material of the art. Analytic means thinking in materials. And whether you are a painter, a musician, a novelist, a poet, a sculptor, there is this wonderful expression of who we are by thinking in materials. What is there in the material, in the materialization of the psyche that wants to come through? Where is the image that is arising out of the use of language that turns out to be something different, a new use of language, or a new use of paint, or a new way of seeing the world through collage, or what is in the material of the marble that wants to come through. The psychic image rises and the artist materializes it. So that idea of analytic arts-based research is really the artist who is immersed in the form. And it so happens that my own particular art form is the murder mystery fiction. And in fact, the cozy murder mystery. So having kind of been reading these novels for decades and writing about them. Thank you, Jessica. Absolutely. This is all alchemy. We're going back to alchemy. So I've been thinking about the murder mystery novel fiction forever. And of course, one of the things I spotted as a Jungian is that it's actually a modern version of the Holy Grail. The point about some murder stories isn't that it's about killing people. Some of them are about killing people, but some of them are actually about putting the world back together again after the chaos of murder. The one unforgivable crime, the one crime that a society cannot survive unless it is solved. So the story of putting it back together is, in a very archetypal level, the story of healing the wasteland. And the fictional detective, who can be ludicrously inept, or a genius like Sherlock Holmes. But what the fictional detective always is in these stories is the Grail Knight, searching for the truth, the Grail, the truth that will heal the wasteland and restore the society. So if that's an archetypal depth in the materials of my creative practice, what images want to come through when I myself become immersed in these structures and ideas and archetypes? What wants to come through? And what actually has wanted to come through is something very ambitious, which is, what about characters that are very hard to heal? Would it be possible to do a cozy mystery with very traumatized characters, such as a woman who'd been trafficked, such as a war veteran who has PTSD? And that's the kind of thinking in materials of the novel that I've just completed. Now, the second, the synthetic, sounds kind of like it's plastic, but it isn't. It's about synthesis. It's about bringing together different ideas in a new form. So here, the psychic image is the blending together of ideas in a new way. And again, this can happen in a potter who is using the traditional forms and ideas in a new way. It can happen in a poet who is bringing in fragments and images and metaphors from different places. And in my story, it happens because these people from different cultures are experiencing culture clash. And that then kind of, that becomes the temenos that allow these images to emerge. Critical activist, again, this speaks to the notion that art has a very powerful social function, that art can be critical of what society is up to, but it can also be active. It can also be a way of engaging with that society. So you can see in the background to my Zoom screen, some very early COVID art, which was on the streets and clearly part of the way in which the culture was coping with this unprecedented experience that we're still going through of the pandemic and the lockdown. And critical activist doesn't necessarily have to be out on the streets. It can be working with groups of people. It can be putting your art somewhere where art is not expected. But again, this is something that is very much because you are challenging the status quo, you are challenging consciousness. You are intervening in consciousness in a way that allows the unexpected and the unknown and the different to rise up within the art. And of course, the final idea of arts-based research that is very familiar to us is improvisatory. That if we hold the space to allow the images to come, we are participating in what Jung called active imagination. And the way he describes active imagination, it is something that artists have known about for centuries. Whether you are a screenwriter talking to your characters, or whether you are a woodworker who it allows the grain of the wood and the feel and that physical sensation to lead you as the work of art is materialized in your practice. Okay, well that's plenty of that. I'm just going to read you the opening of my story, which is called The Sacred Well Murders, and don't worry, it will take just a few minutes because it's pretty short. So I find that it has shut itself when I told it not to. Okay, here we go. So prologue, Stains on the Sacred Well. At Holywell Retreat Centre, the full moon flooded the garden, turning it wild. Janet was picking herbs by moonlight when she spotted trouble at the old well. She was spooked by the moon. Long ago, her brother nearly drowned, following the bright ball into their farm's pond. Now he was cold in the earth, and Janet, an old woman, yet the leaves must be harvested tonight to be at their most potent. Janet was the centre's chief grower, after all. The resident councillors practiced the old ways. Then there were the rescued young women, Janet sighed. Suspicious as sparrows, they obsessed over the magical trappings of their refuge. Be thankful your therapists are also practicing witches, Janet muttered to herself as she clipped stems, buds, and hoary old leaves. Her bag bulging, she was about to dash for the kitchen when she was caught by a gleam from the old well. The moon had found something that should not be there. Trouble, 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 she whispered. From a distance, she could make out damp patches round the rim. Stepping closer, Janet sniffed the scent of rust and candles. That recent, damn. Now she wouldn't sleep. She had to return at daybreak to check the evidence, even though she had a good idea of what was going on. Back inside, Janet paced until dawn. Some mornings, deer swam through the misty fields surrounding the centre. Janet envied their elegant gait on model thin legs. No deer today, though. They would have smelled the offering and shied away. With a scrape and a click, Janet unfastened the back door, straightened her elderly spine, and tramped through the damp grass to the well. It was as she feared. Bloodstains. She knew it. To compound the offence, the initial drops had been fingered into symbols. Someone had daubed a conjuring charm on the medieval well. Even at sunrise, the dried blood smelled of night horrors. Janet shut her eyes. The air still trembled. Such practices possessed power even for a witch as experienced as Janet. Deep inside lived creatures she did not want to see again. Pulling on the white roots of her red hair, Janet cursed and moved away from the desecrated well, letting the bird's song flow over her chilly face and strong worker's arms. Foolish to be unnerved by silly girls acting out, but who knew what would rise when disturbed adolescents summoned the gods? Like the deer, she smelled danger. Of the old well, the guides to Oxfordshire have this to say. Finds from Holywell's actual well include votive offerings of great antiquity. Veneration of the spring goes back to the ancient Celts, whose practices are so little known, said one entry. Another recorded that the rural well had a twin in the university itself. Visit this truly historic well on open days at Exmoor College, between the High Street and Blackwell's Art Bookshop. Janet bit her lip in front of her well. It was too early to confront the guilty. Sinners lay abed, and so did her colleagues. She stumped off to take out her frustration on the weeds. Those hardy beggars were trying to grab the precious drops of water she'd been dripping on the kitchen vegetables. 3 hours later, Janet stood up and rubbed her stiff spine. An idea had germinated. It would involve her friends, Mary, Caroline, and Anna. Well, she preferred just Caroline, but they came in a package of 3. What was it they called themselves? The Depth Inquiry Agency. Janet snorted. She'd have to get her plan past that skeptic Mary Wandwalker, as she was in charge. Janet kicked her hoe and trowel together and strode to the main house. Breakfast was a leisurely affair, despite compulsory attendance for the young women in rehab. Coffee and cigarettes are not breakfast, insisted Cherry the cook. By a combination of intimidation and chores, she got the girls to choose from a sober menu of porridge or eggs and toast or cereal and beans plus vegan sausages. Janet entered through a gust of steam heavy with frying, ketchup and tea. 12 young female heads turned in her direction. A few had the instinct to duck away from the old witch's expression. Right, you girls, said a grim Janet. I've just come from the old well. Enough's enough. This time I'm putting a stop to this dangerous nonsense. Which one of you has been doing human sacrifices again? And there, I'll leave you.
Wow, thank you so much. I mean, that was quite a dose of adrenaline for the start of a story. That's amazing. And I'm sure we can't wait to, I personally can't wait to read the book once it's out. Is it a series, Susan, or is it just one novel?
It is a series. It's actually going to be the third in the series. I do have a literary agent, but I'm hoping that a publisher will bite. It's about to be sent out to publishers.
Okay, well, good luck then, and I'm sure it should be out sometime soon. Thank you. Thank you. And speaking of literary agents and the audience here, Leslie, are you here? Hello? Yeah, Leslie's here. Okay. Well, tomorrow marks a 3-week period of the Festival of Literature for the American University in Dubai, where I teach. And Leslie will be speaking about what makes a great novel. So for those of you who write novels and stories and other things that you are planning to publish, Leslie, I still can't see you. I can see your name, but are you there? Okay, maybe. So Leslie will be giving a talk on Tuesday at 6
Here I am.
Dubai. Oh, there you are, Leslie.
Okay.
Yeah, so her talk is going to be at 6 p.m. in Dubai, which is, that will be 10 a.m. EST and 7 a.m. PST. So I'll post the link of the whole schedule of the festival on the Psychreative Facebook page. So would you want to say something about it, Leslie?
Well, I don't want to give it all away or bore you all, by repeating, but I'm going to really, I want to focus on the practicalities of particularly writing fiction, but I can also talk about nonfiction as well, which has a similar drive to it. It must do a narrative drive. I won't nearly be as analytical as Susan has just been. I mean, that is a real grasp of the theoretics of it. I'm going to be real kind of down to earth and very practical, nothing esoteric about it. So be prepared for that. So I'm looking forward to hearing reactions as well. That's Tuesday, I think. Yeah.
This Tuesday, so, the 16th.
I look forward to anyone who would like to hear me mumble along.
I'll be there for sure.
Okay.
So. Okay. Thank you, Leslie, and thank you so much, Susan, for sharing this. It's incredible. I mean, everybody was waiting to hear some pieces of your new novel. So next, we will move to Hedy, Dr. Hedy Habra. Yeah, you need to unmute. Let me see if I can do that from here. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody, and thank you, Roula, for having me. So I'd like to first mention that I'm not a Jungian scholar, but I've always been fascinated by his writings and still am. And I'll be reading today a poem, and it's a poem inspired by a painting by Remedios Varo, a Spanish-Mexican painter who herself spent her lifetime fascinated by Jung. So this is going to be an ekphrastic poem, and I will ask Roula to project the painting at the same time as I read it. It will be part of a new manuscript that I'm trying to finish right now, all ekphrastic and all inspired by women.
Sorry, Hedy, I'm trying to grab the painting.
No problem. Take your time. Someone asked on the chat the name of the artist, Remedios and Varo, V-A-R-O, and she's a surrealist painter, and most of most of the poems I'm writing are by surrealist, contemporary, or 20th century women artists, and also a diversity of artists from different countries and races, etc.
For some reason, Hedy, it looks now just like a link in the body of the email. It doesn't look like an attachment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see.
Let me try again.
I can try to get it. And
Okay. Oh, no, it's also not opening. Right, okay,
Okay.
I got it. Yes, I got it.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll be sharing it now. Okay. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the title of the painting is The Creation of Birds, and my poem's title is A Bird's Song Unraveled. All artists are night owls, she thinks, as circles grow wider around her eyes. Eyelids lowered, her brush, an extension of her violin-shaped heart, adds the last touches of blush to the feathers' tips. She tries to remember the right words thrown pell-mell in the folds of memory. Memory adds layers to meaning. Wants to retrieve numbers and signs from slumber. Relive the initial moment. Imagines how wingless molecules rub against each other in the copper alembic. All it takes is a double binding broken loose to find the right combination. Only verbs are allowed. Aren't they the heart of a sentence? What of a wordless message as those from the heart strung from the right chord? She holds iridium glasses to gather light from stardust. Hoopoes, hummingbirds, kingfishers, finches, sparrows, swallows, warblers, orioles. She has lost track of how many species flew in search of an answer, each bird carrying its own song from all corners of the earth. Her wings aren't strong enough to cross the 7 valleys. She needs to send an emissary to partake in the colloquy of birds. Barefoot, she steps over shades of silver dust strewn by shooting stars, conjures up their broken light night after night. The original formula, lost since time immemorial, led to confusing myths such as people drowning in their own reflection or making love to their own creation. She knows the secret of the bird's song, its loops and roundness, but chooses silence, lets its wing flutter through the open window. She will try again.
Wow, that was amazing, Hedy. Thank you so
Thank
much for sharing. So I reckon that it wasn't only inspired by the painting itself, but also the concept of alchemy, right?
Yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Next, Gelareh, would you like to present your work?
Sure.
Am
That
I
was
pronouncing
beautiful.
your name right, Gelareh?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
Gelareh. You said 10 to 15 minutes, right? I think I have about a 2,600 word short story that I'm
Okay.
going to read for you all.
Okay. Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay. It's based on a dream that I had, and a friend of mine encouraged me to write a story about it, so I did. So it's called Dimensions of Ahab. Part 1, Magic. It was daylight, but very cloudy and impenetrable, so it felt dark. We were in a cove with high cliff faces all around us, black wet rocks that were jagged and crawling all over with little crabs. For some reason, we were in the water, my mom, me, and this young man with red hair and red beard that I'd never met. The water itself was slate gray and opaque, like the face of a disappointed, departing lover. Something was crackling nearby, as though someone had lit a bonfire right there on top of the water, as though someone was completely impervious to the gravity of their own bodily weight, or else had achieved some miracle of Jesushood and could now not only walk, but conduct a whole camping trip on the surface of dark waters. The crackling sound persisted, but it wasn't coming from any fire that I could see. Maybe the fire was submerged. Maybe Moses was down there with it, rehashing old wounds. My companions were silent. All of us were, actually. We were focused on a giant ripple that was forming on the surface of the water just a ways away. Something huge was fast approaching, and we were all huddled near the bow of a white fishing boat with no immediate means of reaching the ladder on the side. The thing was moving too quickly, so all we could do was endure its arrival, which heralded a series of uncontrollable physiological reactions, like numbing legs and ringing ears, vassals of terror all. I believe the dramatic reactions offered up by 3 wet, rat-like humans were not unwarranted, since the creature proved to be a black whale of otherworldly dimensions, pulsing with nefarious purpose and something akin to revenge on his gargantuan mind. I distinctly recall feeling guilty and deserving of punishment as some hazy memory about the fishing boat floated through my heart, but I could not place it. I just knew without any doubt that the whale wanted blood and that he was justified. There's a sense of urgency now because we don't speak the mother tongue of the dark waters. He comes from the region nether, from a dimension of darkness which for him means quiet intimacy, but for us means fearful doom. Half numb with fear, my companions and I finally found enough motivation to scramble to the side of the boat and get on board in time to witness a most remarkable sight. We had just arrived, soaked and panting on the bow of our ship to see what the whale was doing, when all 3 of our jaws hit the deck hard. The great thoracic beast had reared up on his tail and as if he was a massive black stallion. His mouth was wide open, showing 2 rows of pearly white teeth between which was stuck, head first and halfway up to his midline, an equally gigantic swordfish, wedged deep inside the pink throat of the whale. What's more, the swordfish was still alive. We could see its body thrashing around, probably causing a good deal of damage to the internal landscape of the whale, who didn't look much pleased. His eyes and mouth expressed a rare surprise. This was an unexpected mealtime event that conflicted with prior plans, but there was nothing for it now. He had to see it through. Being humans, all we could think about was ourselves and our precious hides. So of course we used the opportunity to beat a hasty retreat towards some elusive idea of freedom. I call it an elusive idea as opposed to a real possibility because the whole area, the black waters, the desolate cove, the icy blue-tinged cliffs all around us, to say nothing of the psychotically inflamed whale, all of it gave off an air of danger and uncertainty, as if we were inside one of those brumal Japanese water paintings where the water seems hell-bent on killing anyone who dares attempt a crossing. Suddenly, the red-haired, red-bearded young man seemed to come alive, as if until now he'd just been a scarecrow or a fishy marionette hanging on a hook on Geppetto's wall. He had also inexplicably gained about 50 pounds of blubber, spread evenly all over his body, and his voice was deep and raucous. He donned a captain's hat and fired up the engine, speeding us away to safety, our vessel now behaving more like a speedboat in an action film. For what felt like a brief eon, we spread around in and out of different coves and ocean caves, coming back to some and repeating the process. I let my mind drift away as I watched the black waters swirl past me on all sides. I thought I saw a clipper ship way out on the distant horizon, surrounded by menacing orange tentacles and swaying dangerously. But then I remembered that it was just the memory of a scene from a ship in a bottle down in the captain's quarters. A giant squid trying to destroy a clipper ship is a fascinating touch one rarely encounters in such elaborate exhibitions of human boredom. There was something fishy going on, that much was certain, but I hadn't discovered yet which was the fishier group, us or the water folk. It now occurred to me that our captain was attempting to throw the whale off from sniffing out our whereabouts, which explained the repetitious visits to familiar territories. At last, when he was good and satisfied with his subterfuge, he slowed down and brought the boat into a new cove we had not yet seen. Part 2, Goddess. There was an underwater contraption which caught hold of our boat from below and slowly reeled it into the side of the cave house, which was relatively normal looking compared with all the other houses in this particular cove. This cove reminded me of a suburb filled with true hippies, only it was constructed from cliff sides and ocean caves. Each cave house was decorated in extravagant ways with vibrant colors and embellishments made out of oceanic products like shells and seaweed. But there was something futuristic about it all too, as though the occupants had access to advanced technologies which gave their architectural designs certitude and validity. These homes exuded a kind of innocuous mana that gave them a powerful air. Not always what I get from hippie colonies, which tend to look like the innumerable kids were given way too much leeway in the design process. As Captain Calico, he suddenly had a name, was bringing the boat into the cove, I saw one cave house that was exactly like a flying saucer carved out of stone and painted bright lime green. The color shimmered like the aurora borealis even in the subdued light of a cloudy day. The spaceship looked real, as if at any moment it could start up its engines and fly off. It had small circular windows all along the second row, and there were little lights on inside. It looked very cozy, to be honest, but I couldn't be sure that walking, talking fish didn't live inside. The day had been that strange so far. Our boat was tugged up the underwater escalator until it reached a landing made of black slate. A stairwell, also made of stone, led to a large entranceway into the cave itself. Along the left-hand wall, a massive neon light sculpture spelled out the word goddess in 20-foot fuchsia-colored letters. This sculpture plastered the entire cave on every side with a pinkish glow that danced upon every wet black surface and intermingled with an eerie heavenly light shining down from above where a large circular skylight had been carved out. At first, I couldn't understand where this light was coming from, since outside the cave it was a decidedly gloomy, cloudy day. The quality of light shining through the skylight was beyond dazzling. It looked like something from a movie with special effects, like a star if you could hold one in your hand, with a lot of tentacles, beautiful starry tentacles shimmering down into the cave in every direction. It was almost as if a star, an actual star, was pushing its backside into the hole in the roof of the cave and mooning everyone inside. Just beneath the starlit skylight stood a group of 7 African women. Well, actually, one of them was floating in midair. The rest were standing around in a wide circle. All of them were wearing long white garments as if they were ancient goddesses, but of the 6 standing women, one was bedecked in hundreds of pearls and beads and beautiful jewelry dangling from her neck, her wrists, wrapped around her long hair and adorning her brow. She seemed like she was in charge of the ceremony. The rest of the women standing in the circle also had long hair, and all of them had their arms raised up with their hands and fingers pointing and dancing and swaying toward and around the woman who was floating in the air inside the circle. This 7th woman was heavily pregnant. As she floated around, her body moved in circular patterns, almost as if she had no bones. She was very flexible, but it was some kind of spell that made her that way. It appeared to me as though she was being tenderized by the goddesses beneath, as though she was being worked upon by powerful feminine forces for a benign purpose having to do with her unborn child and with her destiny as the mother of that child. By now, my companions and I were standing to the far right side of the cave, watching the ceremony in hushed and absolute awe. The women were singing some kind of song using words from a language I couldn't recognize. It was soft but sustained, and the sound of their voices pulsated in rhythm with the starlight tentacles, as if the light was alive and attuned to the proceedings. A thought hit me with a thud. that the starlight was the father of the child or husband of this woman or both, and it was there to partake in the ceremony of purification and blessing. I started to wonder about the woman in the air. Who was she? She looked very young, her skin was smooth, and she seemed to be asleep, or else in the throes of a peace-inducing ecstasy which made her pliable and tender. There was an energy of love and power in the cave that was almost unendurable. I suddenly felt the need to approach the women and become part of their story. It wasn't just my ego that wanted this either. I actually heard a voice in my head and it said, "Come forward." I left the two people I had come with and walked toward the goddess with all the beads. She turned halfway to face me and reached out her hand. I was all in awe and ready to faint, but she winked at me in a very sweet and disarming way, as if to say, "Don't take all this too seriously." And I suddenly remembered other voices from other lifetimes. Hold your practice lightly. Life is but a dream. Part 3, Reverie. The singing continued as the lady in charge drew me into the circle so that I was one of the women swaying and dancing and blessing the pregnant girl with my outstretched arms. The circle had its own rhythm, but at first I couldn't connect with it. Some dark force was interfering with my ability to dance heartfully with these obviously religious feminine figures. It became necessary to conduct some kind of internal inventory, like a roll call, to identify the cast of characters, the heavies and the petrified, I always carry around with me like a bag lady. I was suddenly determined to rage and rail against whatever I couldn't understand, which included this crazy ceremony. As I struggled to find peace and rhythm, I felt a stab of hatred aimed at the unborn baby. Why was it coming to this world anyway? Why do people puff themselves up so much and imagine they're married to some celestial star being, blessed and tenderized by wise ethnic goddesses from enlightened dimensions of consciousness, to justify bringing another soul into this freaky world where death reigns supreme? Don't people have eyes? Why do they imagine things will be different for their offspring? That they will somehow escape the nightmarish side of life because of the exalted status of the parents? Is it courage or just willful ignorance that drives these dumb pregnancies forward? But I wasn't able to wallow in my negativity for long enough to get really disgusted with myself. Just as I was starting to form the next thought, I felt a hand, or was it an arm, wrap around my waist and hoist me into the sky. The sensation of being hoisted lasted only a tiny moment, just long enough to push me aloft. As soon as my feet left the ground, I was floating and weightless, spinning around slowly, twisting around in semicircles, being pulled and stretched out like one of those taffy machines you see on boardwalks along the Atlantic seaboard. The pregnant girl was now on the ground next to the other dancers, and she was laughing so hard tears were rolling down her very pretty face. Something fishy was going on again, but I had not discovered what it was. Not just the girl now, but even the starlight was laughing. The goddesses were laughing. My mom and Captain Calico, standing to one side of the cave, were laughing. What on earth was everyone laughing about? I was still too much of a twisted sister to know, and my body felt weird. It felt light and heavy at the same time, being pulled in all different directions. I always wished I could be this flexible. The thought puffed across my mind like a slow-moving train. I call myself a dancer, but I'm so inflexible, puffed the train again. Why am I so rigid? Who gave me all this rigidity? As the laughter got louder and louder. I recognized the sound of my mother's voice just then. She said something to the captain, laughing as she did from her perpetually unhindered heart. My heart felt heavy, like something was pushing it around from the inside. It was blowing up like a balloon and surrounding some object, an object that kept wiggling and moving and kicking. This object was the most precious thing in the universe. Somehow my heart knew this. My mind left the circle. I stopped hearing the laughter. Something massive, humongous, lunar and tholastic was stretching outward from my center, and it was pulsating with rhythm and power, and it was red and pink and thrashing around with a swordfish for dinner. It folded in on itself like taffy and doubled down again, surrounding this little object that was kicking and shoving. In the body of the heart, a million little light lines were crisscrossing with a bizarre luminescence, like a fabric was being woven with the tentacles of celestial squids. I could feel a soft pounding in my ears, like I was way underwater, way down in the deepest darkness. I reached my hand down and touched my belly, and a little voice laughed.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Gelareh. I would describe it as an electrifying dream in a way. It's beautiful. Thank you so much. And we look forward to hearing more of this later on in the future.
Yeah, this is my first attempt at a short story. My writing is mostly like cultural criticism or academic work, but it was interesting because it was a dream, and then there was like a collaboration between a part of me as a writer. So some of it I just kind of came out as I started to write. So it ended up being a collaboration. So.
Do you think that the pandemic had something to do with this? I mean, did you write more during this period?
Yeah, I write every day. I have this practice that I learned from Stephen King. He says you have to write every day. So I write 1,000 words every day. It's the first thing I do in the morning. But this dream about the whale and the swordfish and and the goddesses, like all of that was a real dream. But then my own participation in it was more of a just a creative collaboration with the psyche. So
that's amazing. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And next, Bianca. Bianca has woken up really early this morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's almost 5 a.m. in Australia, so apologies if I'm bleary-eyed. So for those of you I haven't met before, my name's Bianca, and as well as being a sort of Jungian academic in one part of my life, I am a playwright, actor, and theatre maker. So that's kind of my main vocation and practice. And so this morning I thought I would share with you an excerpt from a play of mine called Begotten, which I wrote last year just before the pandemic really hit home here. So Begotten is a one-woman show, which I'll be performing soon, but have also recorded as a podcast. So it's in the voice of 5 different women who represent different generations of the same family. But the writing process was really interesting because it came from this very unfiltered place. So I sort of felt like once I opened up to the spirit of creativity in a very Jungian way, these 5 quite, I guess, complete voices arose really naturally. So even though it's fiction, I felt like I was a bit of a conduit for these voices and just tried to give them give them space to tell the stories that they wanted to tell. So I'm going to share an extract from the first monologue in the piece, which is from a character called Alice. And I do need to issue a content and a language warning on this one. I hope no one is offended, but the way that Alice authentically speaks sometimes includes profanity. So I'm just going to give her that space. The context for this piece is that Alice is a young woman who has typically been very cynical, but she's just, I suppose, fallen in love for the first time and is on that threshold of letting persona fall away so that the true self can emerge and be shared with this person that she loves. And she's sort of contemplating the fear of vulnerability. So she's on her way to have a difficult conversation. So I'll just share about 2 pages. It is a longer piece, but it'll give you a little bit of a taste anyway. I want to tell him everything, even the stuff that hurts like hell. How I stole a Cadbury Easter bunny from the shop one year because Mum said I couldn't have one, even though she'd bought 2 for herself. That I was so scared of being caught that I ate it all in one go, in the broom cupboard under the stairs in the middle of the night, and then was so sick from the chocolate and the shame that I threw it all up. And Mum woke up to find me sobbing beside the bath, then kept me home from school and held me in the rocking chair all day, humming songs and stroking my hair, and never even imagining it was the Easter bunny that did it, and how that was the most I had ever liked her and ever would. I want to tell him how 10 days before I met him, I'd terminated a fetus at 9 weeks. I'd known about it from about the 6-week mark, and at first I was freaked and bit the head off my nice lady doctor as if it was her fault I'd forgotten to take my pill. But then later I was lying in bed and I had this vision of me, but like a better version of me. Someone who was calm and together and moved with this kind of soft pink light around her. And holding her hand was this little kid, first a boy, later a girl. And they were walking along together, almost skipping if you can bear the thought of it. And even though I had no idea where they were going, I could just tell they were both having the nicest day of their lives. There was cake involved. I'm not sure how I knew that, but I liked the thought of it. I watched that vision play on repeat for a couple of nights, letting its soft pink lightness lull me to sleep. But then I woke up and decided I couldn't do it. I couldn't be that because I wasn't calm and together, and no mother in her right mind would trust me to hold her kid's hand and take them for cake. I was born with something broken inside me. And I don't say that to get your sympathy or for you to tell me that I'm wrong. I know what I am, and I know that something in my fabric is deeply fucked, even though I don't know why. My temper's too short and I break down like it's a hobby, and the thought of being that responsible for any other living thing that much of the time just turned me to, I don't know, flame. I was some wobbly blob of jelly in the shape of a person, melting down to crystal goo in the middle of a fire. And so I did what I thought was the most responsible thing at the time. Because nobody can stay in your life permanently. You know, we're all ultimately alone, and to try and build some forced bond with another human being and promise you'll never break it, you'll never let them down, it's just foolishness of the highest order. It's asking to become an eternal failure in someone else's eyes. But then I met him, and suddenly all of that changed. How is that possible? How in the space of a month or 2 or 5 can you go from knowing you're a sole agent in this life to actually genuinely, stupidly believing that here is a man you could love forever? Some guy you met on a lousy, boozy night out with lousy, boozy friends. Someone who thinks music peaked in the 80s and fist pumps at karaoke, not to be funny, but because he is really, really feeling it. And it's not even so much finding that you could love a guy like that. That's not what floors you. It's realizing how much you want to. I think about his bed sheets. That's always where my mind goes first. How they're brown and kind of smelly, but in a nice way. And corduroy. Who has corduroy bed sheets? I think about how his feet pop out the end of them with their big toenails and the tufts of hair where the knuckles would be if they were fingers. Sort of cute baby ogre feet. I think about his beard, the scraggliness of it, and how I never pictured myself being with a beardy man, and how I still don't really like beards except for his. I think about the little flabby roll on his tummy and how embarrassed he is by it, and how he says he's going to run for half an hour before breakfast every day so that I don't have to keep feeling the squish of it when we're in bed together. And what I want to say is, don't you dare run that roll off. That roll is sacred and sexy, and it is fucking mine. I don't know why I never tell him that. When he grumbles his way out of bed at 6 a.m. and puts on his Hogwarts t-shirt and his joggers and shuffles out the door like he's on his way to be shot. I should tell him, but I don't. I think about the brown bed sheets and the beard and the roll, and I get this feeling of desire like I've never experienced before. Not like fuck me desire. We covered that ground early on and have gotten some good mileage on it since. It's this deep thing, this yellow burning thing, like I'm being pulled into a foreverness in that place. And there is nothing scary about it because it's right and it's mine and it's been waiting for me since the beginning of time, or some shit like that. That's what I want to tell him, but I can't stop there because there's something more. There's the knowing what I chose 10 days before I met him because of how that possibility felt, how scary and impossible and profoundly not me. And then the turn. No, the suddenness of the turn and the completeness of it, and the fact that I could feel that different, change that much when there was more than my life on the line, and having no fucking clue when things might turn again. That knowledge slices through me like a blade, and it's sheer enough and hot enough that it just might cut the sheets and the beard and the roll clean away. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bianca. That was pretty cool. I want to ask you, like, how much of how far away from yourself do you go when you're creating your characters?
It's a good question. I think there's definitely an aspect of me in all the characters, but in this particular play, as I mentioned, it's 5 generations of women. So we start with Alice and then we move back 4 generations in her family line. And they're all really different from each other. So I feel like although the circumstances of their lives are fictional, she's not having experiences that I've had, the voice is one of my many voices. I think we get into very archetypal territory there where I kind of lean into different potential
Oh, it's breaking up. Yeah, I can see you moving now again.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure if I got cut off, but yeah, different archetypal personalities, I guess, emerge.
And do you have any links to any of your plays?
Yeah, sure. So that particular one exists in its full form, as a podcast, which I recorded and released during lockdown. So I will put the link to the podcast in the chat here if anyone wants to look it up and listen to the full thing.
Yeah,
I'll just drop it in the chat.
That would be great. And you could also share it on the Facebook page. That would give it a bit of permanence there. Yeah.
Will do.
So thank
you all for
Bianca.
indulging me.
Thank you for waking up so early to be part of this. So
my pleasure. I'm sorry for yawning.
Oh no, it was great. Okay, so next we move to Claude Barbre. Claude?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, welcome from Chicago. It's good to see everyone. I thought I've been thinking about which poems to read today. I was getting a sense of what everyone has been speaking about. Over the break from teaching, I wrote a lot of poems about animals, and I think it's coming out of quarantined and also wish to be back out into the wilds. So I will read 2 poems. The first poem I'll read is entitled Octopus. I wrote this after watching a special about this strange creature, and also it may be a good poem to reflect some of the discussions we've had already about the imagination and the synthetic, and as well as perhaps the archetype of the trickster. So the first poem is Octopus. Preoccupied and occupied with space, you think with careful arms, like thought itself. A pied contortionist that sleeks unseen between chrysanthemums of coral reefs. A king chameleon that lies in wait and blends a probing curiosity with strategies of calculated play, as though in bardo subjectivities, you contemplate how best to confiscate an extra day of punching fish and face a sentience of 8 ontologies perpended in a brief semestral life. Midnight Argonaut, Odysseus, disguised, a trickster psychopomp who hides and spies, appraising opportunities to sate a sly insurance for wiles among the aliquot of ample fares. A hydra who says hi before he eats, the hero left breviloquent by fate. You flush and launch from tasting what you touch to lampster stratagems of vanishing behind a cape of ebon melanin with sleights of cloud and inky subterfuge, like sigils on the calling cards of thieves. Their lore of subcutaneous escapes engraved in grimoires penned by sorcerers. Such flight the nautili as neighbors know, how soon you will emerge insouciant with teeth and tongue and heady brain in tow, from bottled dens and sunken cubby holes to prowl for crabs and capelin damask with omicrons that line your lounging sleeves, umlauted large with glyphs and cups of quid. Your parrot beak more avian than shoal, to crack the shells like pirates picking lots, appointed by a silent film of eyes, inquisitive and studious of shapes, with undercurrents of uneasiness, a tragedian look upstaging trust, until you reapproximate how safe the world returns when needed by caress, or dangerous enough to siphon jets of sea and drench whomever would displease. And home again in lapidary moods, where pursed inside your skin, your haptic dreams will morph into roulettes of colors spun like spools of silk that tangle once unwound. You will append the middens of your bed to memories of how it was to feel, if only for a season in your time, a consciousness intelligent as odd, if consciousness at all can be conceived. Okay.
That was the best meditation on an octopus, maybe the only one that I've ever heard. So thank you.
You're welcome.
You've got more, right, Claude?
Yeah, I'll read one more poem in celebration of Women's History Month, and also many allusions to mothers and a good archetype for us to think about. This next poem is called Pear Relish. It's dedicated to my grandmother, who taught me how to jar jams and pickles and all manner of things in terms of canning. So the name of this poem is Pear Relish. At 95, my grandmother would wake when daylight tasseled just beneath the east, enfolded morning glimmers like the gold of corn silk tuft inside their green cocoons, unhusked by dawn, and rise to songs of birds, compelled from ales and shallow drowse to dress and wade into a garden's rumpled rose, where dewfall garnished gloves of rabbit ears and early shows of overspreading chard in twisted canted grafts of butter beans. Along the okra caps a white-tailed doe had missed when startled by unwanted sounds and zagged beyond clematis into woods. With care, she would survey the planted plots, each patch like cruel duvets suffused with down, and stand hip deep in mint and borage blooms, the hushed remands of ruffled lilies hued with sepals bowed chatoyant in their poised ephemera, to work the weeds away, her small arthritic hands still stronger than the man she could outlive again with ease. By middle morn, she'd pick a basket load of ready yields, succession herbs and fruit, but always tarried by the kefir pears, as though she'd wandered into a salon of artists famous for their pear tableaus, conspicuous with commentary nods and calyx wrinkles creased along her brow, her reaching arm like maestro trained batons that tap backstage anticipating how an oboe A will tune an orchestra before the pause that falls to overtures, replete with rondo themes for harvest picks and tempos timed for kitchen alchemy. And home again, the screen door propped to porch, she'd follow recipes for relish droops, with canning troops incarnate with reports on juliennes of cinnamon and cloves, and tips on wedging unripe palms to mince in sausage grinders given to enmesh the coarse and verdant crisp of meaty flesh that raw in oblong shapes, both hard and soft, resembled faces that her features made, a toughened guise grown softer by the years, though always hard inside from life's travails. And soon the cider vinegar, a touch of turmeric to gild the grail, would bring to boil the auric bouillon mash, in sync au sec with summer's repertoire of Raoul's Cicadas' last crescendo stage that thrummed the last ingredients to add sugar, 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 spice. Into the jars and ceiling domes that blend would settle until cooked to okra pulp, the fetes where spooned ambrosia would tell if all had gone according to the plan. And usually it went with everything, accompanied with grateful dialects of incoherent praise with mouths too full to say what happiness it was to taste. Don't look back or cows will lick your cheeks, my grandmother would say, and send a wink, an idiom equation of Lot's wife who turned to salt and salt the cattle like. Then satisfied, the dishes done, she'd sit with nudging cricks of which she never once complained, though pained enough to plainly see, and brought the easy chair to Lawrence Welk.
That was beautiful and very touching. Thank you so much, Claude. I've always made this connection with food and both of my grandmothers, and this is what kind of gives it a sacred aspect, especially some recipes that our grandmothers or grandfathers would always cook for us. This, it changes our relationship with food. Food becomes symbolic, food becomes somehow the mother archetype, or as you said, in celebration of grandmothers. And then there's a lot of mentioning of pickling things and cooking and sugar and cinnamon. So it's amazing how we do see the mother archetype, or this maternal energy of nurturing, and not just nourishment, not just nutrition, but there's a lot of nourishment and love in the process of cooking.
Yes.
So thank you. It's actually, I will be reading a similar poem tonight, a very similar poem. But first, Greg.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
It's an honor to be here amongst so many wonderful people. I'm in Detroit, so I'll read a couple poems. They're very short. Two short ones and one slightly longer one. The first one is called Homunculus. Creation without love is a man's dream. Paracelsus said it was easy. Put semen and ox blood in a glass jar, add a horse uterus, bury it under manure for 40 days. By then, in the warm darkness, a shadow creature will have formed. It must be fed daily with tincture of blood, though he never clarified exactly what that was. Care must be taken, for should the creature escape from the glass jar of the man womb, it will perish. Here's one more brief one called Validation. Validation. Guzzling Malbec like a broken down, boozed up child star. I watch videos of myself as a kid. A birthday party 50 years ago has been Super 8 digitized. And I finally see what I always felt through the camera's eye, that look of hatred she gave me and the thread in her eyes before she noticed the camera and remembered to paste on a smile. And one more. This is called Why Am I Surprised? As soon as I feel close, I feel far away. I have enemies within that hate me when I love. Why am I surprised that I do within myself what the world has always done in the face of the new kingdom? My joy in her bed is my howl at the door slammed shut again and again by the manufacturers of misery, that same door that Christ opened and Theodosius tried to close. They castrated Abelard, slaughtered the Cathars, burned the witches. When they expelled the Jews from Spain, how could we not expect pogrom after pogrom and pretend to be surprised by genocide? How could I expect any different from my world? How am I surprised by lies, MAGA hats, and QAnon conspiracies? It's the same people over and over, manufactured in some thunderous mill, like orcs that never run out. There are always more, Pharisees, crusaders, priests and preachers, demagogues, ghouls, dead parents, angry old white men in red hats, unhappy, weary, gall-soaked, slithering things. They burned de Molay for their own sins, slowly after torturing him every day for 7 years, knowing he was innocent, a king and a pope. It's a new iteration in every generation. Something inside me hates the world, expects to be betrayed, shuts the door, and hates me when I dare to open it. Maybe if I can love her and him enough and myself, forgive the world, love the world, wedge the door open with his help, for he has reopened it patiently every time it is closed. Maybe together the three of us can leave them, at least for a while, staring, gibbering and toothless.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you, Greg. There's so much depth in very, very simple language. It's very close to the heart, and at the same time, it's very deep. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I guess I'm the only one left, so I will read a couple of short poems from my newly released book. It's called Simply Being. I will also be launching it at the Festival of Literature on Wednesday, so the day right after Leslie's session. It'll also be at 6 p.m. Dubai time, which is 10 a.m. EST and 7 a.m. PST. Okay, so this poem is called To Savor and Relish. And I wrote this a year ago, right after my grandmother passed away. She passed away at the age of 102, so she had a nice long life. And she was also known for her wonderful cooking. And because of the pandemic and because I couldn't travel to see her or to attend her funeral, I felt some solace in being in the kitchen more often. So I was cooking more. I was remembering her and reliving much of our memories together, which we had in the kitchen. So the poem is called To Savor and Relish. Whether it's lazy cake, banana bread, custard, marble bunt, or a savory salted log of fries, when their airy little fairy whips channel my inner Peter Pan, they jump into that black hole where all is lost in translation, right beneath the shaded grove of the cerebral cortex. Into that storage room of scenes they pry, rummaging through childhood memories while dallying with my emotional thermostat. In retroscrying, I see myself with friends and siblings, commencing the weekend around a Monopoly board, on a cozy Friday post-school afternoon, propped on a carpet bedecked with an audience of curious crumbs and candy wraps. I see my grandmother busy with life, filling up cupfuls of sweet cinnamon joy, as she hums love, an acoustic match to the olfactory heaven she creates. Some days we were scolded for staying out in the rain. Those were made of bittersweet chocolate. There were mornings when we bit into an icy winter day as our teeth guided the way through the warm oregano pastry. And those birthday parties when cake was everything and life was one big vanilla puff, and blowing out the candles was not an evil act of spreading germs. We held brunches on the terrace when the weather allowed a Sunday to live up to its name. And those nights when Grandma arrived, wrapped up in cloaks and shawls, as she brings us a warm thermos of lentil soup, which, like her, remains temperate despite the frigid world. It's these images and aromas of winter that keep us snug. Despite the cold, we kept warm. And today, when we're feeling gelid again, we still reach out for these smells that lead those walks down memory lane. And we defrost. Cronus is a professional abductor, but cake pays a handsome ransom. So this was To Savor and Relish. I'm going to be sharing one more poem that I wrote again during lockdown when we couldn't travel and we couldn't even leave the house at that time. And I was craving sunlight. I was craving being able to look at the sky properly. We were living in an apartment in a high-rise tower. We were on the 14th floor, which is very typical of Dubai. And because of all the skyscrapers out the window, you couldn't really see the moon properly. And that was something I missed. So this craving for the moon, for being under the sky, for having enough light during the day, and for traveling was something that I made up for by writing about it. So it's called Moonlighting. Sometimes I get fed up with the megalomania of confinement, of being where I don't want to be. But there's nothing that time or space can do to limit the vacate in vacations. So I let that inner roar tame the outer lion. The lifelike whirlwind of boredom only sets me freer as I stare into the only source of light, air, and noise I have, a small opening in my awning window. I wish there was a Narnia inside my closet. It must be the lack of coats. There was a full moon, a pink moon, and a ring of fire. I had exactly 5 centimeters to capture a glimpse of my lunar company with my camera. I squint and then cover one of my eyes for a sharper, clearer vision. The glass is goosebumped, over-embellished with polka dots of acid rain, making an awful see-through. With enough uncertainty and unclarity in the world, I'd rather view the clair de la lune through that crack, no wider than my small hand. And I look, and I see, and I marvel. Overjoyed at the concave droplet of silver in the vast ebony sky, dotting the eyes of the world. A wide aperture is in the eye of the beholder. I could swear I saw it smiling several times, and I heard it whispering silent vespers of peace, something to go with the friendly beam. Per amica silentia luna. Sometimes the only means of travel you have is a train of thought. So I look at my desk and commit metaphors of all types. A book becomes another world, opening like a street musician's accordion, with the sweet tunes on a busy street. Underailed, I take my pen as a rail ticket and doodle my destination on that tiny space left on my groceries list. I glance out another window, my laptop screen, through which, while inhaling my coffee, I finally see the swinging city, greeting me with softy vans, theaters, squares, books, bookshops, and galleries reverberating once more with the heartbeat of a loving giant. Let me shut my eyes and just be there. So this was it for tonight, or this morning, again, depending on where you are. I want to thank everybody for being here and for making this a very
Sorry, I think
enjoyable.
Inez still has to go. Inez?
Sorry? Oh,
I think
oh,
Inez.
sorry. I'm so sorry, Inez. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, Inez, please go ahead. See, that's what happens when I close the list a little too early off my laptop. So Inez, we can't see you or hear you.
Can you unmute, Inez?
I'm unmuted. I'm unmuted, okay?
Okay, yes. Now we can hear you. Yes, I'm so sorry again, Inez.
No problem. I am so glad to be here, and I am so full from each of your gifts today. It's like a wine tasting without water in between the tastes, right?
Love that.
I like this.
I have written in various genres, fiction, play, but most recently, most in poetry. I was just recently rereading John Barry's Integrity in Depth, and the last lines, the last page of his book, he quotes Erik Erikson, and there's a phrase in there that really resonated with me in that quote. It's called responsible renunciation. I thought I was going to have to practice it right now if you forgot me totally. There's a poet, John Kavafi, you probably know him, the Greek poet, and he has a wonderful poem called Candles. And in it, he uses the image of candles for our days. And behind us is a long line of burnt out, rather deformed candles, because they're the days we've already lived. The candle's already been burned. And in front of us is whatever lit candles remain to us. And when you're aged, the idea of responsible renunciation becomes very meaningful. Everything from table salt to future acquisitions. And I've recently discovered, thinking about all this, that poetry and the entire world of imagination is not something that requires responsible renunciation as you age and as that line of candles gets shorter. In fact, the space for and the time for that realm of life expands. And I wanted to share that with you today, along with, I'm going to share two poems. The first one was in response to a dear friend who all her life has struggled, not just to her, but partially. All her life, she has struggled with finding life worthy to live, worth living. And this last year has been particularly straining. And we had a long conversation. And after that conversation, I let myself drop into my own heaviness. And from that emerged this poem. It's called Hope That Old Tease Is Tickling My Heart Again. The doom, gloom descends. Human ancestors, Genghis Khan, Simon Legree, our current madmen, Donald Trump, my own kin, among the maskless many million sharing COVID and nation with me, determined to destroy rule by law, insisting they're born free to breathe out virus for white supremacy, darkening each dawn more and more until, voila, winter solstice. a bit more sunlight each day, and that depressing doom begins to clear just a little, enough to start to recall how beautiful the world is, how interesting life in all its forms, how alerting the call of the blue jay, arresting the hit on my face of oh so fresh chill air, seductive the fragrance of simmering supper. And I recall Jack the goat leading Charlie the blind horse from paddock to pasture and back again until the end of Charlie's days. And the puppy with a 4-inch tail growing from his third eye in the middle of his forehead, judged monstrous on Facebook, threatened with death, licking the faces of disabled children, laughing and reaching for him. And how the sun is just the right distance from the earth, and ocean evaporation just enough for the rains, and John Lennon singing Imagine, and the visions cast and overstory there for readers eager to become the kind of human beings we could if we would. And I am moved to move again, put on my Tai Chi shoes and try to remember life's form in my body. Look at the sky to see if it is clear or full of journeying clouds. Then open myself to finding you. Allow, receive your glad, lancing smile. So catch myself thinking not only how to live today, but what I might do if granted tomorrow.
Wow. Very moving and very deep, and very touching. Thank you, Inez. You have another one, right?
This is it.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
There's another poem.
Okay.
There was a period in my life when I did a whole series of poems I titled Dark Matters. And at the time, I was quite engaged with thinking about gravity, both in its physical and emotional dimensions. And so I wrote this poem, which I think you'll see is related to shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Dark Matter 2, Floating with and Without Gravity. Gravity, shaper, swirler of galaxies. Without you, astronauts adrift above our world float right out of bone. We need you weighing us within our airs to keep bones strong, to make floating lilting magic, metamorphic. I want to float here in this world, not always, for my feet love the feel of earth, but when I'm down, stuck, struck, I want to speak the secret of floating. Orgasm, postpartum, poem, perhaps awareness floats days and dreams nights. Forgiveness, horrors of the past, and love, could it be true, our knowledge of evil? Can love possibly float our encounters, recognitions, our sufferings of evil in history, others, ourselves? I know I've known faces, seeing my muck, still loving me, and my own repulsion at vileness in my loved ones, my hovering at the edge of no more. When the breath of love, a waft of sorrow, protective, and a surge of warmth for all that is fine in them lifts me. And I not only care for them again, but care more carefully, aware of the frailty of my loves, of my love. Thank you so much for listening, and I am so grateful for this gathering and this initiative. The forming of this community is a wonderful thing.
Thank you so much, Inez. That was fabulous, actually. I love it when science gets all poetic. And yeah, and how much it has to teach us about our emotional side as well. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that up to the surface. And I also want to thank everybody for being here today and for making it such a wonderful 90 minutes or 100 minutes right now. I look forward to meeting again next month, and I'll keep you updated, of course. And please let me know if there's anything that you are planning on presenting next time, so that I can book you in and we can accommodate that. The Facebook group link is already in the little section. I'll put it again in the chat box in case you missed it. So here it is. And again, for those of you who do not use Facebook, please feel free to email me on this. I will just give you my email here. It's Roula-Maria Dib at hotmail.com. And do let me know if there's anything you would like to present in April. And thank you all again, presenters, audience, for the lovely energy. Susan, for giving us this incredible opening. So thank you all.
Thank you, Rula. Thanks for putting this together. It was wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
And this session is recorded, so I'll also be posting the video on Facebook or via email. All right, so until we meet again, bye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.